Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the Steampunk Desperado channel. Today's topic is the Sun Eater series by Christopher Ruochhio. It's one of those sprawling sci-fi epics that spans centuries and thousands of light years and considers weighty moral issues, in particular the way that good intentions can go horribly wrong. It owes a lot to other famous works, and though no story is truly original, I can name a dozen influences off the top of my head. Is there a serious message to this, or is it just a mashup of a dozen other sci-fi epics? We sci-fi and fantasy fans are always yearning for the next great epic, because if the first book is good, we invariably want more. Examples are Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Asimov's Foundation series, Herbert's Dune, and Martin's Game of Thrones. On the sci-fi subreddit, somebody mentioned Sun Eater, and I thought, this sounds interesting. Maybe it's my next new epic. There are 6 books in this series, with the 7th to be published soon, and I have listened to those first 4. The first book, Empire of Silence, came out in 2018, published with Daw Books, and there are 3 others that I have read: Howling Dark, Demon in White, and Kingdoms of Death, and those are all awesome titles, by the way. I have a thing about great titles. The action takes place around 20,000 years in the future, and it has a single protagonist, Hadrian Marlowe, the man who will become the titular Sun Eater. Marlowe was a Palatine, and thus a nobleman, son of the lord of a backwoods planet in the great Solan Empire. Humanity has colonized the stars, but they're not the only sapient race. We humans are clearly on top, displacing or enslaving the few other races that we have encountered. Faster-than-light travel does exist, but the galaxy is so huge that even at the maximum speed, many times the speed of light, it takes years to get across it. So travelers spend a lot of time in cold sleep, which they also call fugue. Humanity's biggest challenge is a conflict between the Empire, which rules most of human space, and the other polities, such as the Norman Expanse, and that is not necessarily mean they're French, but it's the Norma arm of the galaxy, and the extrasolarian worlds, which are kind of bizarre and quirky and independent. That's the biggest challenge until they meet the Cielsen. It's a fierce nomadic race. The Cielsen fit perfectly the human concept of demons. They are tall, strong, and deathly pale, with horns on their heads and sharp teeth. They're hermaphrodites. Thus, their whole society is geared for war. There's nobody who stays home and doesn't fight. Reproduction is kind of a secondary concern. They begin raiding and despoiling human worlds, and most terrifyingly, they love the taste of human flesh. Here's where the good intentions part comes in. Hadrian is a sensitive boy, and when we meet him, he's a teenager. He does not accept his society's pervasive institutions such as slavery, its vast class inequities, and its blood sports such as gladiatorial combat. So this society is clearly modeled on the Roman Empire, but with a strange Christian-like religion that worships the earth as its deity and messiah. The actual planet Earth is a dead world, devastated by the first Solan Emperor from many thousand years ago when he vanquished the demonic Americanii. And yes, that is after the Americans. These were computer intelligences that enslaved humanity for its use as a resource, and much like the Matrix series. After the liberation, all advanced computing was banned, exactly as in Dune. Instead of the Mentats doing all the computational work, the Solarians have a monastic order that they call scholiasts. Hadrian's father has decided that he will enter the Chantry, the empire's answer to the Inquisition. These people prosecute heresy, which includes forbidden technologies or anything that defies church dogma, such as the notion that humans were the very first sapient race to enter the stars. Now, we will soon discover that this last bit is not true, and there's a horrifying reason why it's not true. Hadrian has no desire to do that. Hadrian hates the chantry because it is deeply involved in assassination and torture. He wants to become a scholiast, like his beloved tutor Gibson. He wants to devote his life to advancing human knowledge. Speaking of life, technology has greatly extended the human lifespan. But peasants still have the old 10. Palatines like Hadrian have been genetically engineered to age slowly, and their lifespan on average is 10 times that. So 700 to 1,000 years. So this would be a very long life of scholarship. Hadrian's father is not to be disobeyed, so he has to escape. And he escapes his homeworld with the aid of his sympathetic mother. Thus begins a series of misadventures that leave him stranded on a backwater world called Imesh. Having been disinherited by his family, he does a lot of desperate things to survive, eventually becoming a gladiator, yes, the thing he hated, in a place called the Colosso. Because of superior strength, his training under Gibson, and his gusto and strong will, he survives and builds a cadre of friends and comrades that fight with him. Attracts the attention of the planet's king, and he becomes a mercenary and a leader of his own company. And he's also reinstated as a nobleman for his service to the empire. His dream is to meet with Seleucian leaders and negotiate a peace treaty to end those centuries of war which has caused so much bloodshed and misery. The pale, as humans call them, because they are very pale, are not evil, he thinks. No, they're just misunderstood. As we'd expect, his good intentions and his overtures to the enemy don't turn out quite like he planned. All the while, we know Hadrian's destiny because he tells us this, that it's to be the Sun Eater. It's to use alien technology to destroy a sun, to make it go nova in order to destroy the Seleucian fleet and save humanity. Now, he's writing this narrative as a very old man in exile. So we're going to learn it bit by bit over the centuries that he's been alive. The upshot of it, anyway, is that Hadrian's good intentions go awry again and again over his very long life. I want to pause here and contrast Sun Eater with Pierce Brown's very interesting Red Rising series, which also has 7 books from Del Rey starting in 2014. Red Rising also features a futuristic Roman-style empire, though this one has not gotten past the solar system, and it's, I think, only 700 years in the future. There's also a rigid caste system. This one is based on eye color from the engineered castes of people, and a brash young hero, Darrow of Lycos, that is, on Mars. The difference here is that Darrow is a truly heroic character who succeeds, at least initially, in mounting a revolution against the repressive powers of the Empire. Thus, the pacing of Red Rising is much faster than that of the Sun Eater. I found Hadrian a bit more difficult to relate to, not because of what he will become, that seems to be an unfortunate necessity, but his attitude regarding it. He is hesitant. He is frequently tormented by regret and self-doubt. He is also quite prudish, which contrasts him with the working-class Darrow, who's more of a lusty sort. The sex lives of these two characters say a lot about them. Both are monogamous. This contrasts them with traditional philandering heroes such as James Bond, and I suppose it's partially a consequence of the feminist influence in our culture and especially the publishing industry. Both characters lose their first loves tragically. Darrow's teenage first wife is executed as a martyr to the oppressive state. Hadrian's lover Cat is a street girl that he meets on Imesh, and he's kind of surviving with her, stealing to survive, and she gets a plague and dies. But after this initial tragedy in both lives, both of them acquire a long-time love. Darrow meets another woman and marries her, the progressive-minded noblewoman Virginia, aka Mustang. And Hadrian's multi-century paramour is the foreign scientist Valka. And by foreign, I mean she's from the extrasolarian worlds. As I see it, Darrow is monogamous because he loved so fiercely. What straight man could help but worship the blonde, beautiful, and brilliant Mustang? Hadrian, on the other hand, has rather Victorian sensibilities, but more so as he has our present day obsession with differential power. Yes, he's very worried about he might be, pressuring somebody into sex earlier on in the book. Velka is an interesting character, and she's also brilliant, but she's quite odd and somewhat detached. Every time Hadrian says, "I love you, Velka," her response is, "You're not wrong." What does that mean? At one point, Hadrian is imprisoned with her, and this is before he actually ever confesses his love for her. And he's imprisoned with her for several months in a small cell. Now, does he ever say, "Gee, I love you, Valka"? No, he doesn't. Does he ever, try to steal a kiss? No, he doesn't. It's not till they're released that they actually get together. And if I recall correctly, she initiates it. Hadrian is a very sensitive guy. And unlike a lot of present day male feminists, he is sincere, but he never uses that, "oh, I'm a good guy," to try to win anyone's favor. He's actually turning opportunities down. For example, when the king of Amash says, and actually there's two kings because it's like a gay relationship and they have children via genetic engineering. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, with the kings say, "well, gee, we want you to marry our daughter, who is beautiful, intelligent, young, nubile, all those things, and so that we can take advantage of your superior palatine genes." He says, "No, that's offensive. I'm not a piece of meat." Yeah, so you think, what's wrong with this? Especially since Valka, she's very progressive minded. She's from a world where they don't really have long-term monogamous relationships. Yeah, it's fine. This exemplifies my problem with Sun Eater books. On the one hand, they're finely crafted narratives with thorough and believable world building, even if it derives a little bit too obviously from several other works, such as Dune, Red Rising, a bit of Foundation in there, and so forth, The Matrix, etc. It's Hadrian's philosophy, or it's Hadrian's personality, as opposed to Darrow's, that sets the tone and the pacing of the book. So, despite having a lot of well-imagined and often harrowing battle scenes, Sun Eater is slowly paced, in my view. It takes Hadrian a long time to get from one phase of his life to another. Maybe that's realistic, and especially considering the long journeys where you're sometimes in cold sleep, but other times he just stays awake while everybody else is asleep and he broods because he's a broody sort. It probably doesn't help his brooding that he has been chosen for higher purposes by this alien race called the Quiet, this mysterious alien race that was here before humans. There are times when he survives death only because the Quiet bend time and space to keep him alive, or rather to bring him back to life. Now, this is why he earns the title half mortal. And so people think he cannot be killed, and perhaps he can't. He's a goody goody character, and so you kind of want to see him do something bad. And finally, you do when he's on the galactic capital, and there are other noblemen who are trying to assassinate him because he's too popular. He's too popular. They feel like he's going to displace them. He has this guy assassinated. I mean, basically, Hadrian pays somebody else to have this guy killed, and I'm thinking, hooray, he actually did something bad. I like that. So, on the other hand, there's a sequence in the fourth book, which is as far as I got, where he, having escaped from certain death at the hands of Cielcin, he just goes into hiding for a while. Now, he has his reasons. His reasons are very sensitive, and the Empire's in peril. The Cielcin are planning all these surprise attacks, and he knows of these. Much as he hates the Empire and what it represents, the Cielcin taking over would be a lot worse. He kind of reminds me a little bit of some of the female protagonists that you see in, like, fantasy romance. And I've read some of those too, where he's kind of undecided on how to go forward. And if the Quiet wasn't quietly manipulating him, he might not go forward. So once again, we get back to good intentions. Is Ruochhio virtue signaling? Is he trying to make him more appealing to females? I don't think that's the case. I think it's more like Hadrian's Puritanism is a way to contrast further his good intentions with what actually happens as a consequence of his campaigns, etc. Whatever the reason, it made him a little bit less appealing and compelling to me than, for example, Darrow Vallecos. A bit about the author. Christopher Ruochhio is a rarity in the current publishing world. He's a white male who has signed on to a major publisher since 2013, which I consider kind of a watershed, when things became really woke. But Ruochhio was lucky in that he worked for Baen. He was an assistant editor for Baen Books, one of the few uh, less ideological publishers out there. And thus he had an in the industry. Disregarding my criticism of Sun Eater, I still did very much enjoy it, and I'm happy for his success, and I wish him the best. As with Pierce Brown's books, I will finish the series at some point. The difference is where I recommend the Red Rising series very enthusiastically, my endorsement of Sun Eater is kind of lukewarm. It's good, but no big tragedy if you don't get around to it. I mean, they're a little slow. And all of this Hadrian saying, oh, what's become of my life? All the terrible things I've done. It gets a little tiresome at times. But he is a complex character, and complex characters are important for a good story. This has been my review of the first 4 books, the Sun Eater series by Christopher Ruochhio. Please let me know what you think about it in the comments. Please like and subscribe. Also, check out my books on Amazon. Links are in the description, including my newly published work, Hunter's Wager, a cyberpunk fairy tale. That's pretty good, I think, if you ask my unbiased opinion. For now, this is Steampunk Desperado saying adios, amigos, from the Steampunk Desperado channel, where the past meets the future and the present is extraordinary.